as I had a little disclaimer, none of this is going to be biographical. I'm not going to be talking about where they come from in terms of what makes them humans, but rather what makes them political actors in this field. So here we go. Oh, no.
Did you pull that off?
I did. No, I didn't.
Is the stick in the laptop?
Oh, it's a laptop.
Going to the blood.
No, I could send it.
Oh, well. You just press it. He's good at this. All right. Perfect. I thought I should open with a series of quotes. It wasn't on, yes. And this is a really remarkable quote because if you read it without the context of any dates or where it's from, I will say that the context of it is fairly important because this sounds remarkably like the situation in either Kuwait, Iraq, or Afghanistan. But it's actually an excerpt from a letter written in 1967 when President Lyndon Johnson was considering Vietnam, right? So Hannah Arendt, who is a German political philosopher, was a political philosopher. She was still alive and remarkable. She considers politics as a narrative because she comes from the Hegelian tradition of philosophy. And this idea of the world's greatest superpower, America, hotly disputed and not a pretty one because everybody never considered, in her opinion, that Vietnam has been fighting off foreign invaders on their territory for 2,000 years. And the political function of the storyteller, historian, or novelist is to teach acceptance of things as they are. The funny thing about the modern political narrative is that nobody seems to consider things as they are. In Vietnam, nobody thought about how they were fighting off the Chinese for hundreds of years. And nobody considered the fairly unique characteristics of Iraq and Afghanistan and their own rich history and culture. The funny thing about democracy is, right, aside from Winston Churchill quote, that it relies on the equity of voice and vote. It means that my vote is the same as your vote, and it doesn't matter whether or not you have more than I do or you have less than I do. And politics is also remarkable that it considers our backgrounds, it considers how much we know and how much we trust each other. That's what the state should be founded on. And today, our idea of that trust is fairly shattered because of things like Vietnam and Watergate. The fabrication of anti-communism and the fabrication of they have WMDs over there, let's go invade, they're exactly that. They're actually lies. And it's outrageous to us that politicians lie to us because they sell themselves, they sell their faces and their image and their name founded on trust. When it's election year, they tell you everything you want to hear. Because, funny enough, every 4 years, we trust them to carry out what they're saying. This is from, ironically, a memorandum written by President Obama or his press office about transparency in government. And a couple weeks after he released this, he renewed the USA Patriot Act, which is, as far as I remember, one of the biggest breaches in trust between the government and its people. We now have legislation saying that we can tap your phones, we can read your emails, we no longer trust our own citizens to make correct judgments, and when a state reaches that conclusion, there's nothing left of it that you can rely on. Daniel Ellsberg, the guy who leaks the Pentagon Papers, he was also working for the Pentagon, as in he was inside. Every single time a major breach like this happens, in terms of leaks and whistleblowing, it always comes from the inside because someone else is saying, wait a second, this isn't okay, and people should know about it. This reliance on transparency always comes because there is a conclusion that should be made, and not alone, not in secret, and not in a funny-shaped building where nobody else knows what you know. Because we're talking about lives. We're talking about people saying, you, daughter or son, go and die for this ideal, which means that everything should be on the table. I just said that, but she said it better. And the domestic consumption thing about propaganda is hugely dangerous because for years and years and years, we've always believed in or we've always considered the idea of nationalism, right? America's the best, or Korea's the best, or Vietnam's the best. And this idea of buying into what we are, or what we should be, what is our destiny, that's a really remarkable thing, because sovereignty should be protected in terms of strength and not a belief. But this is a quote from Thomas Andrew Drake, who won the Ron Ridenour Prize, and he was a Vietnam War veteran who leaked out the secret of the My Lai massacre during Vietnam. And it's fairly ironic that he won an award for this, because the way that we see people in politics who are whistleblowers, they're either reviled as traitors or they're lauded as heroes. In the case of PFC Manning, the Guantanamo Bay documents, which revealed exactly how horrifying the conditions were in the jails, and the collateral murder video, maybe you've seen it, it's fairly horrifying in terms of context as well as how it's treated in the media, because everyone was saying, look, there's horrible things happening. And in our generation, we said, yeah, Big Brother's spying on us. Duh. The journal article of the Uniform Code of Military Justice says that soldiers are there for each other. You die for each other, you protect each other, you help each other. So when you are betraying or releasing truth, depending on how you see it, oh my God. What is there left when there isn't the element of trust? That's an iconic picture. The Jean Healy quote is actually really interesting because the Cato Institute was releasing article and article and article saying that this guy is horrible, this guy is terrible, this guy is wonderful and great and excellent. It's a really remarkable debate to be having because privacy is the biggest issue of our generation. Are you gay? Are you married? Are you making X amount of money in X amount of time? This is stuff that is so important to us because of social media, because of how we can evaluate truths by ourselves without relying on the unified front of military like journalism and censorship. The Espionage Act, PFC Manning remains to this day the only person to be convicted of that, although there's definitely been a lot of people to be charged. Edward Snowden is currently evading capture, but he has definitely been charged with the same thing. And that's so funny to me because PFC Manning was in the military, and he was charged with aiding the enemy, which was the biggest crime of his rap sheet. Whereas Edward Snowden, as far as I know, everyone who talks about him, they love the guy. This idea of trust comes from national sovereignty. It comes from a sense of unity between you and I. It comes from citizenship and belonging. And when your democratic government says, I don't trust you. I don't trust you enough to do things in your own home. I don't trust you enough to say things on the internet or in emails or on the phone. How are you going to trust me when I elect you to office? And on that note, questions, comments, concerns? You.
Supposedly, like, Congress's approval rating is like 75% or something ridiculous. Say Congress is doing a horrible job. 90% of the people in Congress are incumbents and continue to be reelected. So why is that happening?
I don't know the name of the study, but it was a fairly frequently cited study where people don't like Congress, but people like their individual congressmen, right? Because every 2 years or every 6 years, everybody says, I'm going to go fix Congress. It's broken, and you're right to call that out, and I'm the guy for the job. So I think in terms of that, like, it's definitely this idea of selling your face and trusting you to say, yeah, you are the guy for the job. Please fix the state of government. But it's also the idea of modern political narrative and how we see it, right? So it's always a story now, isn't it, with CNN and their graphics, and they say, this guy versus this guy. And it's kind of like a political cage fight, except it shouldn't be this entertaining. It shouldn't be about his personal struggle and the rent is too high. So in terms of elections in Congress, the layover period between elections, I think people should probably start considering, well, he's telling me everything that I want to hear, but can I trust him to actually execute that? And no longer see Congress as broken, but maybe the people running for it? That might be a different way of looking at things. Does that answer your question? What do you want?
Well, I was also
I know him, that's why I said.
Yeah, in response to that, I was also going to point out that in the case of the House of Representatives, the current incumbents are allowed to redistrict their voting districts as they see fit, which can in effect allow them to basically rig their own elections to be, I mean, rig is a strong word, but I mean, it's the correct word. They can pretty much rig their own elections.
I see your point. I see your point because, and I think that also goes back to the trust thing because it's no longer objective, and it's incredibly well. This neighborhood, I think, buys my image more than this neighborhood. Equity of voice and vote is democracy, and the idea of drawing a funny little line in the sand and saying people who live outside of this neighborhood can't vote for me, that is no longer democratic. Anybody else? You, and then Mr. Fletcher Never.
All right. Well, from thank you for your presentation, and it's, from what I've noticed, it's not nowadays. It's not even so much that citizens trust the people that they're electing as they're trying to find the lessers and equals between who they have to choose between.
Oh yeah, I like this guy. It's not that I like this guy, but it's I dislike this guy more than I hate that guy.
Exactly.
That's not mathematically correct, but no, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a mixture of this idea where we see politics as a story. They're characters to us and say, this guy, he comes from this background, or this lady said this one thing, and now she's that girl. It's no longer organic. It's no longer honest because we're all about that cable TV ratings. So it's a freakish observation to make, but I guess that's kind of country religion.
Yeah, at what time do you think that the politicians just seem to accept, or the people accepted that it was no longer choosing between two goods rather than choosing between two evils?
I don't know, because I don't know dates, but JFK, right, and the whole radio versus the TV thing, where the people who was listening to the presidential debate thought that Kennedy lost, but people who were watching TV was like, oh, Kennedy's going to win because he projects this image of being charismatic and young and energetic, and I'm going to vote for that guy. I really think that's when it started, when people from a significant number changed from just information into visuals and almost like a movie, you know. Mr. Fletcher, and then you, yes?
Yeah.
Cardigan.
Okay. I was listening to that about the gerrymandering with the district lines and setting it up so that the two parties are always getting their share of the votes and things like that. What I was curious about in the political narrative, I mean, we've always been a two-party country, but as it's deteriorating more and more into, I just don't like the other party, so I'll vote for mine, do you think there is an opportunity for a moderate third party to come up at the local level?
Oh, at the local level, I think
Yeah,
that's
and
more.
at the furthest for now, I would say state, but do you think that's a legitimate possibility for states to start
I don't think
going?
it's a possibility. I think that's happening now. We're living in a very funny era of time where people no longer have to rely on filters like party platforms in terms of general message. Now it's my Facebook page and I'm running for office and let's be friends and let's talk about this. Let's open up a discourse on a different forum.
Well, and sorry, just because you said that, it made me think, do you think that that level of technology is opening up for trust to come back into American politics?
I think,
Because you can
yes.
get all that digital information all the time.
I think yes, because it's again, it's no longer about filters, and it's also about a very freakishly naked kind of honesty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where it's, this is me and this is you, and I am trusting you with this. It's no longer, that guy on TV, you know, he had a great commercial. He had, and I really buy into that narrative of him as the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that like a TV show.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's good.
And you and Never.
Okay. I just like to say,
That's it, no.
oh, wait.
I was just wondering if you're talking, we heard a little bit, Casey Manning and Snowden, and you started talking about kind of the narrative as one is the villain and one is the hero. And I was thinking, like, what they both did was pretty much exactly the same. Why do you think they were perceived differently?
I think the judgment part of it is definitely subjective. So maybe you have a connection with the military if you come from a history belonging to the armed forces. then maybe you'll see it differently than myself, because I don't have that personal background. In terms of political narrative and how they're judged as traitors or heroes, I think it's really reflective of how we actually see the issue and therefore see the people, who are the actors. Because the thing about Manning is that he's kind of seen as the whole underground, he bucked up the trend and he's really stuck it to the man. And from what I've seen, the PFC Manning thing is really, he was in the army and he made that promise to die for a fellow soldier, and he goes out and sells out his country. That being said, I heard it from both. But I really think it comes from the emotional vehemence of how we feel about the issue. 1, 2, personal background in terms of its relation to the issue. And 3, I'm going to say it, like popular culture. Because Edward Snowden, because he's the underdog, you think, kind of trench coats, not Carmen Sandiego, but kind of, but like, he really, really living it out there in kind of Cold War, very daring. Whereas the PFC Manning thing is nobody seems to know what's happening, has a complicated personal history, has a history of being mentally unhealthy, I've heard that, and somehow that seems to carry over, whereas Edward Snowden, he's the cool guy, and he did the cool thing, which is going against the grain. And no, we kind of need to wrap it up.
Other people didn't get that answer. Does anybody else have any questions for any presenters?